After 17 years of working with the the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, while you are working, you see and observe so many things happening. And in a number of cases, you are like, that would be good for Uganda, that would be good for Uganda. But once you are hired to work as an international representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization, you cannot be there and then effect anything in Uganda. The minimum you can do is if you know anybody, then you share what you have seen and hope and pray that it happens. That is why when I was preparing for my retirement, I already knew I was going to do advocacy for agribusiness. Because in Uganda, for a reason I don't know, we don't lobby. At least you don't lobby openly. So it is always covert, and neither do we advocate. In fact, when I started advocating for agribusiness, some people thought I had joined the opposition. Of course, for me, I didn't know what they were talking about, so I just continued doing what I'm doing, and I'm glad that finally people understand and appreciate what I'm doing.
You've been in so many different sectors. Why agribusiness?
First of all, I'm a Ugandan woman, and in Uganda, most of agriculture stroke agribusiness is done by women. That is one. Then two, I'm a farmer's daughter. Really, that is what I knew growing up, and maybe that is why even when it came to going to university, that's what I studied. So that's what I know, that's what I love, and that's what I do.
When I look through your profile, and every time you're introduced, and from the things that you were just saying, speaking to your work at the Uganda Development Bank and as the Minister of Agriculture and so on, you've held high-level positions for a very, very long time. Do you ever get lost in that and struggle to come back to relate with a smallholder farmer, with the communities? And I know that this is where you want to have impact now. But what has it been like for you to then come back into the communities?
You graduate from Makerere and from university, and you go straight to a bank, and this Uganda Development Bank was a new bank where I worked for 13 years. You start imagining that the whole of the agriculture sector is up there. But when you join politics, especially when you have to look for votes, you stare at the reality in its eyes. That is one. Two, when I was at university, I studied farm management and extension. Extension means you get this information from the scientists, the researchers, and whatever. You deliver it to the ordinary farmer in a language and style they understand and appreciate. I think that class is one of the few classes which is taught when you go to see the farmers. It's okay to eat with them. But the moment you become their colleague, they can ask all those questions which they have always wanted to ask, and even tell you why. Even if you tell them to do A, B, C, D, they are not going to do it. So you don't waste your time waiting. You go and maybe find another solution.
What's the reality that you're speaking about when you say when you're in politics and you're on the ground canvassing for votes? What's the reality that you see or you saw with our farmers?
While I was MP and I was looking for votes, this is when you really go to the home, you sit down, and especially the way my father taught me, if anybody is not supporting you, those are the people you should visit and spend more time with. You get there, they tell you he's in the garden, and you tell the child, take me to the garden. So you see the garden and you talk about the garden, why isn't it doing well? Maybe you change to this, maybe you try that, maybe you talk to so and so, who knows? So by the end of the day, you actually have learned more than just about the votes. Secondly, when you are looking for votes, there are so many people who want to be your managers, and it is up to you to draw the line. For me, the line was, if you are so poor that you are not having a second meal during the day, there's no way you are going to be my manager, because that one is just looking for what we call in Uganda, today's food. So as you segment your voters by looking at their income, their gardens, their homes, their children, because you look at, if you want to know if a home has got food, look at two people, the children and the men. Because it is always the men who eat last in Uganda. They think they eat first, but they never come to the kitchen. So by looking at the children and the men, you know the status of the economy of that household. And my constituency was peri-urban. That is where most poor people stay. But like most Ugandans, they are so friendly. So wherever you go, they like open up and that really taught me a lot.
You're the chairperson of the governing board of Uganda Agribusiness Alliance. We'd like to try to wrap our heads around what the alliance is doing. It's been in existence for about, what, 14 years now or so?
Yeah, no, 10 years.
10 years.
Because we started in 2014 and this is 2024.
What does the alliance do?
Like I told you when I was abroad and I saw this and the other, and I was wishing to bring it here, the most important ambition we had starting Uganda Agribusiness Alliance is to share the knowledge and mostly the knowledge and the experience which I have from ever since I started doing agriculture. So we had to come up with a way of sharing it, which we agreed to be convene meetings, talk to these people, listen to these people, make it regular, and as time goes on, put them in charge. Like how? We normally look at agribusiness, value chain by value chain. So if you look at a value chain, like right now, we are looking at, tomorrow, we are actually having a meeting of the onion and garlic value chain. So what do we do? What we do is we look around who is eating onions. Nearly every household in Uganda at least has one onion a day. Then two, we look at the government policy papers and the imports. When the government of Uganda shows in its imports budget that they import vegetables, what do they import? Garlic and onion are really high up there. Then we go out and say, physically on the ground, who is growing garlic and who is growing onions? Why aren't they producing enough to feed Uganda so that we really do not have to import garlic all the way from so far away? And even for onions, if we are going to eat it every single day, for how long? It is just not sustainable that we import them. Thirdly, we find out, is it possible to grow them anyway? For that one, we work with NARO. So I'm sure you have already deduced, we form networks, we bring stakeholders together, and we agree on how to concentrate, develop, and promote this particular value chain.
That's very specific. It starts from what we put on our table, what we need on a daily basis, and then how to promote the growth of that. We're constantly saying that agriculture is the backbone of Uganda's economy, but is that true?
For me, I think it is true, but not from an economist's point of view. Because for me, the backbone is real. And in order to have a strong backbone, you have to eat well. So if agriculture is producing enough in order to feed the Uganda population so that we are strong, even the issues of, when when a pregnant mother eats very well and gives birth to the child and feeds very well, this child is already intelligent. There's no stunting, because when you see those stunted children, anybody who is below average height and whatever, they were stunted right in the womb. Now, if the child is not stunted, is fed well, by the time they are school children, they are fed well, they even perform well in school, they are not constantly sick, they don't need the hospital services as much as hungry children would. So, for me, the backbone of the country are the people. Now, if the people are healthy, we have a healthy backbone because of agriculture.
Are we seeing intentional efforts to support agriculture? When you think back to the last 10 years of the Alliance, have you seen growth? Are you seeing its impact? Or are we still where we've always been?
There are a few mistakes here and there, but certainly the effort is intense. Because you find that in areas like Dere, the increase is mind-boggling. Same with coffee, we are doing very well. Same with some food. Some people may not want to eat that food, but we have really increased the production of maize. We now feed not only Uganda, but the whole region. So if you don't like posho, I'm sorry, but that one has increased. We have also increased the production of beans. Research was done recently, and it was confirmed that in the whole of East Africa, every single household at least has a dish of beans once a day. But most of those beans originate from Uganda. So as far as I know, agriculture is doing much better. Even when you look at the exports, we are now exporting more horticultures, more coffee, more maize, as I've told you, more sugar. And as a result, sometimes we are having issues with our neighbors because they can't believe that Uganda can produce all that sugar, that Uganda can produce all that milk. They started that rumors that we import and we do whatever. And I'm like, no. I have no cause to tell you lies. I've been there. I visit this, like I told you, I go household. And I see the milk, I see the maize, I see the rice being produced, and I see the beans.
Beyond our neighbors not believing that we can do this, we've actually had a number of complaints when you speak about maize, when you speak about milk, the quality first of all. Are we failing at quality? What are we doing wrong? Where are we not being intentional in promoting exports from Uganda?
If I can specifically talk about maize, when you are my neighbor and I'm still in the garden harvesting my maize and you arrive with your big truck saying, I don't care, just, thresh it and I'll take it. Then you get there and start saying, oh, it wasn't dried properly. You did not let me go through the system. True, a few times we have had issues, like last year, we had a very prolonged rainy season. So drying our coffee, drying our maize and whatever was problematic. But that was just a one-off. It is not like all the maize coming out of Uganda has got aflatoxin and all that. When you know the language of traders, if I want to underpay you, the first thing I do is talk down about your product. I don't even like the quality. And I feel like telling you, and who called you here? You don't want the quality, go next door. That is one. Then two, we need a system which is region-wide. Like I've said, if you are going to drive your lorry from Mombasa to my little village in Iganga, and you force me to sell you the maize, and the money is good, because for me, I grow the maize for sale, don't turn around and start blaming everything on me. Also admit your part in this whole game.
This feels like the problem is not so much on the farmer.
No.
It's on the system.
Exactly.
So how do we clean up that system?
It is very easy to clean up that system. If the government can insist that whatever is done value chain by value chain. Let me stick with maize. Okay, I grow half an acre of maize and I eat half, the other half I sell. So I sell 5 bags of maize every year. You grow 10 acres of maize, but you are my neighbor and you buy a bit of maize from me. So the thing to do is for you, since you are interested in my little contribution and maybe so and so and so and so, to make sure that we talk, you and I. You tell me, I'll buy your maize if you do A, B, C. Like what do I mean? Do the right seeds, plant at the right time, and when it is ready to harvest, I'll come and pick it the day you harvest it. So you take my maize, which is 5 bags. It is not totally dry, but because you are slightly bigger, you have got a drying system. So you take my maize, and you take my neighbor's maize, Margaret's maize, and all that, you dry it, and after you have dried it, Mr. Juma, who normally comes around with a pickup, will come and pick up your maize and take it to his relatively small silo. But this Peter is already working with James, who owns huge silos in the city. So from the word go, the seeds are good quality. The agronomy has been taken care of. So I don't have to worry with my half acre. I don't have to worry how am I going to dry this maize, how am I going to thresh this maize. So you do the threshing in a clean environment, and you can guarantee, because you have seen my garden as everything was growing, and now when the bigger Juma comes to buy, you can guarantee the quality because you were there.
Honorable, when you speak about this, it just seems very clean. It seems like it's common sense, and why are we not doing it?
It is.
But it feels like there are other problems that are long-standing. When we think about the health of our soil, when we think about, there are a lot of things that we are, maybe we might need to address. Is it really just about the system?
Everything can actually be fitted in the system. You are talking about the soil. I have said, if me, Victoria, the one of the half acre, you are my off-taker, and you already know my village, you know my house. It is time to plant, like we shall be planting again in October, November. So by this time we should be talking. You have been growing maize on this plot for the last 10 years. I think we had better have it checked. So somebody comes in, checks it and tells us, yeah, it needs a bit of potassium, a bit of nitrogen, a bit of this. And given the results we have gotten, this is the combination you should apply. So when I get the right seeds, together with the right fertilizer combination, and I plant at the right time. And like I said, my agronomy, because these days maize has to be sprayed against the armyworm. So you and I together have agreed that this is the chemical which is safe, which I'm going to use to spray my maize. By the time we are harvesting, because now we are partners, by the time we are harvesting, you know exactly what I planted, how I planted it, and you also know the state of health of my soil.
You come from a farming background.
Yes.
Your family were farmers?
My father was a farmer, my
Okay.
mother was a farmer, my grandparents were farmers.
And you're a farmer?
I'm a farmer. My granddaughter insists I'm a subsistence farmer. Why? Because where I live, I've got a piece of land where I grow most of what I eat. But she said in class they taught them what is a subsistence farmer? Somebody who grows and eats what they grow. So I'm a subsistence farmer. I grow all my vegetables. I grow my onions, I grow my avocado, I grow my bitter leaf, if you have ever eaten bitter leaf. In Uganda, they normally don't eat it. I just love it. So I grow my bitter tomatoes, everything. I grow them. Katunkuma, yes. Okay. I grow my sunsa.
When you were younger and on the farm and thinking back to where you are now, when did you ever start hearing or thinking about climate change? And what did it mean to you then?
I grew up on the farm, I learned counting on the farm and so on and so forth. But as time went on, and I'm maturing and I see people moving from the village, people moving into the village, I realized that if you are a farmer's daughter and you marry a farmer's son, that way you are just planting poverty. But I think this came out of, you know, when you look at this garden, this woman has spent the whole month maybe planting sweet potatoes, weeding sweet potatoes, and eventually is harvesting and eating sweet potatoes. And I imagine myself living that type of life. I'm like, no.
We have this thing that your elite Ugandan does not want to engage in agriculture because it's a poor man's occupation. Mm-hmm. And you really just said it. We should not marry farmers. Mm-hmm. We should have nothing to do with farmers. Mm-hmm.
After I told my father that I was not going to marry a farmer, then like 4 years later, I tell him I'm going to study agriculture. He's like, what are you talking about? It is one thing being a wife of a farmer. It's quite another being an agriculturalist. So we had a conversation between my father, my mom, and I, and my mother was saying, no, we don't want a daughter who is an agriculturalist. It's my father who saved the day by saying, no, she's not going to be a farmer. She's going to be a scientist. So that exonerated me. Now, when I say I'm not going to be a farmer's wife, you know, there is a difference between a farmer and an agribusinessman. Mm. So I'm not advocating to marry farmers per se, you know, those subsistence farmers. It is perfectly okay to marry an agribusinessman.
So when did you start noticing the changes?
I started noticing the changes, I think, when I was staying with my grandmother in Bujiri. That part of Uganda is still a bit traditional in that every piece of land belongs to a certain clan. And some clans are more prolific than others. So the clans which had less land were tilling the same type of land all the time. And you could see that the soils were already complaining. So in addition to that, when you see that the neighboring farm still has its trees, but this particular farm, which does not have trees, is the one suffering, then when you go to your grandmother's garden and she always says, go under that tree and bring that banana. Go under that tree and get the pumpkin leaves. That is when I started noticing that apparently if you have trees in your garden, the garden, especially if it is perpetually under production, will perform differently. But at that time, I had no idea why. Now, as I grew up, and of course, as I became a banking officer, and I was funding these people in order for them to improve their agriculture, I had been taught at university what happens when you farm the land too many times. I had also seen it. So when we would fund, like somebody going to grow maize, we would include fertilizers. What is unfortunate, though, is that when I was a banker, in quite a number of cases, because when when we're in the bank, you would sit down with the farmer and say, we give you so much money to buy the seeds, so much money to buy the fertilizer, so much money to build a store. Then this farmer would say, cross out the fertilizers. He is borrowing. He's the borrower. You cannot say, I insist that you take the fertilizers. In fact, I'll never forget one time I took some seeds and fertilizers to a certain army detach because they happen to have a lot of land. So I told them, since you are the army, it would be fantastic if you produced a fantastic crop of maize. So what do? You plant the right seeds at the right time with these fertilizers. Most of the army soldiers said, we shall take the seeds but not the fertilizers. And it was free. So it is that ignorance which has been haunting me all this time. Basically because even if everybody is seeing the change, the mitigation measures are not part of our culture. So it looks like we need to talk and also expose, plant, invite people, show them this is what we are talking about, and eventually they will change.
Do you think that there is an understanding of what climate change is?
First of all, there's a feeling of that there is climate change. And but you see, real life is very interesting because while you are busy thinking about climate change, the people are just getting on living their own lives. So here you are, you have noticed climate change, and you have noticed that maybe if you plant avocado, you plant mangoes, you plant oranges, that will help you because that way you will not be tilling the land, you will not be worried if the rain comes in January, February, March or whatever. But meantime, you have got people to feed. Yeah. So while you are perfecting your climate management and all that, these people's eating habits are changing. So currently, we are having to deal with the change in climate, the deteriorating soil, but most importantly, the change in eating habits. This is especially important in Uganda, basically because about 80% of our population are below 40, and that's the age where you think you are on top of the world. You want to eat what you want to eat, not just what is there.
What we can now afford that we were never able or allowed to eat as much when we were children. How do we relate the two for people to understand that there's a correlation, and so with the changing climate, but also with our habits?
The beauty of that question is that the women are actually in charge. You know, the reason Ethiopia eats what they eat, injera and what they eat, the reason Ugandans eat what they...
Is that injera thing, the chapati?
Yes, the chapati thing, yeah. Okay. It's because the women woke up one day and decided that they are not going to cook every day. In Ethiopia, they cook once a week. And the food is there, they only do the sauce. So you have that injera for breakfast, lunch, and supper. That's it. Then the women in Zimbabwe discovered that their men love nshima, which is maize corn. So they cook it for breakfast, lunch, and supper. In my view, the thing to do is listen to the women. Get the women working. Let them produce what they think is best for the country. Let them cook it and serve it every day. Problem solved.
Where do you see the biggest challenges for farmers when it comes to climate change? Where are they struggling? And I know you spoke about mitigation, but should we really focus on mitigation or adaptation? How do we support farmers?
For example, when we talk about farmers, the first question is, what are they farming? Then the moment you sort out is that, then the next question is, how are they farming it? However small your land is, fence it off using a live fence, meaning plant some trees, preferably edible trees. If you are in Uganda, for example, we tell you to plant mutuba. What's mutuba? Mutuba is ficus, is one of the ficus trees, and ficus trees are edible. They are edible, they have a lot of branches. Normally when we tell people to plant the ficus tree, the men jump on it. They plant the ficus tree because they own the land, so they fence it off. Secondly, they own the livestock. So they cut the branches of the ficus tree to feed their livestock. And for once, the Ugandan man brings firewood home. So because one of the issues, the largest issues of climate change is firewood. Yeah. So we do not go to the men and say, sort out the firewood problem. So we talk about something else. I mean, after all, these are men. Then we tell the women, this firewood will go a long way if you can join a group which improves cooking stoves. So they do these cooking stoves which preserve fire, and that, in a small way, that is a contribution of a household. Because in my view, this climate change mitigation or adaptation or whatever has to be done household by household.
Sometimes I feel like we make advancements, then we go back. So on the political scene, the president will speak about, you know, charcoal banning and so on, and set out rules and guidelines and policies and so on. And Kavera bans, you've seen all of them come and go. Where do you think our problem is in terms of how we take this and actually make it work?
Even if a number of people in Kampala are still using charcoal and firewood, quite a number have adopted either liquid gas or electricity. But because normally when you do the right thing, it is not news. Nobody can come to my house and say, oh, she's using electricity. We concentrate on the charcoal. So, like I said, if we can go household by household and work with these people to make these changes, surprise, surprise, it will work. Because when you talk to these women, for example, using the stove which does not smoke, nobody will tell you they miss the smoke. If anything, they will invite, you know how we want to do our couples, our conversation in the kitchen. Then you'll be invited, come and see my cooker. Kumbe, I want us to sit down and talk. So at last, the women can comfortably sit in the kitchen without smoke. So if I sit at your place, then I will ask how you did it. And in quite a number of cases, these stoves are being built by women. I will pass it on to the next woman. So I, for one, I'm not about to despair. What I'm thinking now is make it easier for these women to share this technology and this possibility as much as possible. So that when and if you have a change, it is not like the president has visited you at your house and made the change. It is you and your aunt who have sat down and made this change. Then the grandmother will change, then life will change.
In closing, Honorable, what would you like to see with the agriculture sector of Uganda? Both under the alliance and also as an individual who is intentional about communities.
If we can get to a stage where every commodity that is produced in Uganda has a visible value chain, so that if, for example, you are producing bitter leaf is very easy to plant. All you do is you get those seeds, throw them in your garden, and they will grow. But you find out who is going to buy bitter leaf. It is true you are going to eat it, but who is your buyer of bitter leaf? You go to one of the markets, you find out who normally buys bitter leaf, and they tell you how much and how to harvest it, you know, how long, how short, how many leaves you should bring, and so on and so forth. So that if I come to visit you and find, surprise, surprise, you are growing bitter leaf, I will ask, what happened here? Oh, that is very nutritious. I got the seeds from my aunt so-and-so, and I started growing it. I ate it and see what I look like. But it is so much, yeah, because I've got a buyer. If we can have that conversation for each and every commodity, that is one. Two, if government can then come in with its system, how? You see, one of the most difficult things to do in Uganda is to upscale. That is why most of us remain small scale and subsistence. So the role of government would be to come in and make sure that at a stage where there is a need for more money, there is a system from which one can borrow without killing their business. That is one. Two, in some cases, really, I as Victoria may not need to handle that money. Because, for example, if what I need is good seed, I don't need to handle the money. If I can go to the bank, this seed is coming from Josephine, so the bank will create your account and I take the seeds. That way, I'm done. I go and grow the maize. Come, like I said, I get the seeds, I get the fertilizer, I grow, knowing that you are going to buy my product because you and I are already committed to the bank. Because you borrowed, I took the seeds, I owe it to you to sell the food. So if the government can do two things, make sure that that type of system where affordable money is there, and two, set up enforcement rules, because it is very difficult to do certain things in agriculture, basically because sometimes somebody is stealing. Let's say if I come and let's say you are a businesswoman, you are growing seeds for other people. And I come, let's say if it is maize, I come, I steal your maize, I roast it and it is eaten. The amount of money you get when you do seeds is not the same amount of money you get if you are doing just ordinary maize. So if somebody comes and steals your precious maize, shouldn't be treated as a petty thief. So the government should do its job, make sure that the resources are available for me to do a good job. Secondly, the enforcement of rules and regulations should actually be there. Then thirdly, when and if things totally fall apart, because in Uganda they do, but in a positive way, what happens? We got the garden and plant expecting maybe 20 tons, but God sends more rain, more sunshine, and it doubles. It is always it is always the farmer who suffers. Let government stop treating its production agents as orphans. Let them be there. How? Once again, we go back to borrowing. Make it possible for those people who are at the apex to off-take everything. If need be, once again, lend them money at affordable costs. And because in Uganda it is up and down. Within less than 6 months, the price will have gone up, this person will sell and pay you. But once again, make sure the rules and regulations are enforced. Whether I'm your daughter or I'm your uncle, I should pay my debt.